I bid you welcome.
So a couple of days ago, I watched. I was perusing on YouTube. As you do, you're looking around for stuff, and one thing leads to another. And there was a picture of George Knapp.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So I clicked on it, and it was a lecture he gave.
Yeah.
Maybe I think a couple of years ago. I think all about the his time doing UFO research and that. But it was also primarily Jeremy. What's his name? Jeremy.
Korbel.
The guy. Korbel.
Korbel, yeah.
He was there. He was in the audience.
Oh, right, okay.
This presentation he was doing this thing, and it was about what's his name? Lazar.
Oh, yeah,
Bob
right.
Lazar. He had video of him now sat at the table talking to him about his experiences, and basically the lecture was about how he broke Bob Lazar into the limelight and into the media, where Bob Lazar said, "You need to make me a public figure because I feel like I'm going to get bumped off."
Yeah, they're gearing up for the whole Lazar thing because Jeremy Corbell has that new movie coming out at the beginning of December called Lazar, where he's going to go over the whole Lazar story and in a full interview with Lazar as he is now, talking about Area 51, S4, the sports model ship, all that stuff.
Do you remember all those boxes when we watched the Skinwalker Ranch video? All those boxes that were in, I take it they were in George Knapp's house where he had one of those boxes of all those videotapes. Well, on this lecture, he shows video that he recorded back in 1989 in the desert of just away from so many miles away from the base, and it was him, Lazar, and what's his face,
Jonathan Lear.
They had video recordings of them three because obviously at the time George Knapp was interviewing him and putting his story together, and he needed proof. Are you just making this up? And he said, "I'm going to take you to a place at a certain time where they're going to be testing these vehicles."
Yeah.
And they have video of these lights in the sky.
Exactly. That was one of the major points that drove home that this guy knew what he was talking about, because he would say, okay, at 8 o'clock tonight, on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, this is going to happen. And they were out there in the desert, and he said, look above them. And at 8 o'clock, it happened. And that just added, a huge amount of credibility to his story. George Knapp was the guy that broke the story for Lazar and basically Area 51, because before Bob Lazar, there was there was an Area 51, but nobody knew about it. I mean, there was rumors and speculation. It was not in the public eye. It wasn't in the public eye at all. Right? If you went back through time to 1989 and mentioned Area 51 to somebody, they wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about. Try doing that today. You do that today. You just grab any random stranger on the street and ask them what Area 51 is, and they'll be like, "Oh, the UFOs, the government." They immediately they know, and that's purely because of Bob Lazar and George Knapp breaking this story and bringing it into the public forum. Now, I don't know about you, Reeves, but ever since I learned about Bob Lazar back in the early 1990s when all this was going on, a lot of people were immediately like, well, he's mental, this is nonsense, he's out to make a few bucks and it's all bullshit. I was one of the few people that actually bought his story, and I still do to this day. I do not think he's a liar. I think he is being 100% truthful when he sits down and yaps about seeing UFOs in the desert.
Well, back then, if you came out with a story that you had an experience or you worked for, I wouldn't say what you term now a whistleblower. I wouldn't have said that it was like a whistleblower thing back then. It was more like a guy that's coming out and he's got... And of course, when he started talking about this stuff and it started to gain traction, people immediately started to dig up his past.
Yeah.
And saying, and they bringing up all these things. Oh, he was involved with a strip joint. He was involved with this business.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it was like they're trying to muddy his who he is as a person.
They erased
so that people don't take him
all of his work records. They erased his college education, And he said he went to certain colleges, and they called up the college, and they were like, no, I don't know who that is. But then they'd find people who were like, oh, yeah, I remember that guy. I was in such and such a class with him. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah.
You know, and he said that he worked at Los Alamos, and there was no record of him working there. And then I think it might have been George Knapp. They found an old phone book from like 1988 or 89, because in Los Alamos they would publish a phone book of everyone who worked there. And in the phone book, there was Bob Lazar with the Los Alamos number.
Yeah.
Now, if he didn't work there, what the hell was he doing in the phone book?
Yeah, and Lazar still has his past papers to get into the base.
Yeah.
Like a credit card thing with a number and your picture on it. And he had photographs of that. He said he still got it. And the interesting thing is, from the early lectures that he did, which I found fascinating, because I back in those days, maybe the same as you, I ate all that stuff up.
Yeah.
I would watch so much of it.
Yeah,
back in the day of before YouTube, you had Google Video and stuff like that. You know, before YouTube was the mammoth it is now, you'd go to sites like Google Video and people would post lectures and stuff on there, and I would watch that stuff. And the stories he would tell about, he would picked up in a unmarked coach.
With
the windows,
the airport, they fly him out to Area 51.
Yeah, how things were compartmentalized. We would get on a plane. If you worked in a certain area, you would sit in a certain place, and the plane all being sectioned off where you weren't allowed to talk with people who worked in different parts of the base. Everyone would get off at different times on the plane. You would go to different areas to do your job.
Right.
You couldn't have conversations when you were there. You would just do your job, talk to the people you need to talk to, and that's it. Then you would be searched at the end of the day. You'd have to sign out, and obviously you'd be taken home, flown back.
When he first came out, I don't know if they touched on this in the lecture that you saw. I don't think I've seen that one, but I've seen a few online. But I don't know if where they talk about where when George Knapp first encountered Bob Lazar and interviewed him, he said, "I'll come on camera, but you can't show my face and you can't use my name." So there's an old video of him in shadow where you can't make out who he is.
Yes,
and they call him Dennis.
Because at the beginning, it was the fact that he wanted to completely be anonymous. He didn't want his I think, like anything, if you got this kind of, experience, this story, whatever you want to call it, and you want to start talking about it, the first thing you're going to worry about there's going to be people out there that don't want me to talk about this. And of course, when you're up against something like the government, they're going to make you just disappear in an instant if they want to.
Yeah.
And so I think that, now, things have got a bit weird now, because you think now everyone's a whistleblower. They're a ten a penny. Everyone's talking about this and talking about, obviously, 80% of those people are just talking rubbish, but there still is a core of people who, have experienced much like the Lazar story. Well, but I think Lazar's story is...
I think it's legit, dude. I really do think it's legit. There. And now, posts Edward Snowden... they're calling Bob Lazar as the Edward Snowden of ufology, right? Because the stuff that he leaked is so powerful and has so many ramifications, for technology, defense, our place in the universe, how reality functions, spirituality, everything. And the information that has come out, it's amazing information, but I think there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more depth to the story that we haven't discovered yet. But now that Jeremy Korbel and George Knapp are coming out with that new movie towards the end of this year, 2018, called Lazar, that's something I'm really looking forward to see where they go and what new information is handed out. And even if there is no new information, just to see a current modern interview with Bob Lazar will be something very special, I think.
I think what would be good is that I don't mind hearing the story all over again, but I think because it's been so long and the time has passed and he's been able to put things down in a more organized fashion, to hear the story in more depth.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping, that there's going to be more depth to his story and his experience. And because if you think about it, all he talked about, there was this UFO. It was it called the sports model? They
he called it the sports model. He said there was 9 ships total, and they were all different configurations, different shapes. But the one he was working on, they called it the sports model because it was the sleekest looking of all the ones that were present. He said there was one that looked like a top hat, all different shapes and sizes. But the one he looked at looked like a traditional flying saucer, very sleek. And so he called it the sports model. What's going to be good, though? Yeah, what's going to be good in regard to this movie is that Jeremy Korbel and George Knapp are doing a world premiere of the movie at a theater here in Los Angeles in December, and I got tickets. So I'm going to be going to see that. And what's amazing is that Jeremy Korbel, George Knapp, and Bob Lazar will be appearing after the movie to do like a Q&A after the event. So I'm literally counting the days. I cannot wait to go and see this and check it out.
Well, considering for how long that Lazar's been out of the limelight, and he for many years he just disappeared.
Yeah, he didn't want to know. He removed himself completely from the spotlight, and I don't blame him, dude. I mean, when you think most people when they're encountering this kind of information, you immediately get the shaking of the head and the rolling of the eyes, and this guy's mental. And I simply do not think that's true. I think he's on the level. I don't think he's bullshitting. I think it's legit. And the information that he's imparting to us, it really is reality shaking. It's groundbreaking stuff, for sure.
Well, I listened to a lecture recently by Richard Dolan, and and he was talking about stuff in general and about UFOs in the military. But a small part of his lecture, he was talking, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was someone quite important, and he was a friend to someone who was very high up in the military. And he said, I'm going to show you stuff now. I took him out to an air show, and then he said, let's go to the real air show. And he took him to the base. It was, I don't know where it was connected to Area 51 or what was Area 51, but he took him to a hangar, which had armed guards. He told the friend of his, don't say anything, just follow me. We're going to go in. And they went into this hangar, and he was showing him aircraft, which he recounts as being partly built. And the guy was explaining, this military guy was explaining that these are experimental craft. They're being built to experiment different types of flight systems and stuff like that. And then on the other side was a big, what he explained to be like a plastic-style curtain. And behind them, he said there was a number of like saucer-shaped craft which had no landing gear, but they were as if they were hovering. They were just there hovering. And he asked what those were. And the guy basically responded, well, if you've seen Star Trek or Star Wars, these are years in advance of that.
I remember, And there was another one too.
Craft.
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the craft that he noted that these craft looked like they had been used for because they looked like they'd been around and been out in space and stuff. They were all used up, and you know. So obviously, all these different people talking about all these different stories. All right, you have to have proof to a certain degree, but it does make you think that you go back to the Lazar story and you hear these stories. It's like it really. There's something there. There has to be something there.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do, Reeves, is I'm going to go to the event in December, and I'll probably take some pictures and stuff, and I'll report back, and you can interview me, I guess, on what took place during the event.
I will have many questions to ask you regarding that. And what I'm hoping they'll do is release something on YouTube, like a little Q&A on YouTube as well.
It's possible, yeah, for sure.
That would be pretty cool.
What the plan is that they'll have the premiere of the movie in the theater, and then they'll have the Q&A, and then midnight that night the movie will go live on all streaming platforms and iTunes and all that stuff. So I'll get to see it live in person with the people, and then I'll go home and pay my $10 or whatever it is to purchase it, to get the movie, my own copy, after the fact. So they'll do the premiere and then release it worldwide right afterwards. So a lot of people will be able to see the documentary.
judging for the last one, the Skinwalker one, which I thought was really well put together.
Yeah.
I hope this is. I'm got good things. I'm hoping for this one, and I'm hoping it's going to be as good as that and as informative as that.
I agree. I think it will be. If you go on YouTube and you search for the Jeremy Korbel trailer for Lazar, he's put together like something like a 2 or 3 minute trailer, but you get a good feeling when you see the clips in the trailer, and you see obviously little bits of the documentary. It really does look like it's going to be very, very good. So we'll keep everyone up to date, and this has just been basically a quick Bob Lazar update as Bob Lazar firmly comes back into ufology's consciousness again. And we'll be back with more very soon.